Hello, I'm Petru and you are watching WellCode, and I'm very excited about this interview. I'm here with Marius. He's a really talented and good programmer. I was a roommate with him in my senior year of high school. This was happening in 2013 and he was already a guru. He knew the answer to every question I had in regards to programming. He was in the Romanian national team for computer science. Apart from that, he did a lot of personal projects, and he also worked at one of the best companies probably to work for. And the thing is that in order to get there, you have to pass some really difficult interviews. I also interviewed there and I failed the interviews, so I know that it's very difficult. And also he studies at a very unknown university. It's a really bad university. I don't know why Marius has chosen it. It's called Oxford University. It's obviously in Oxford in the UK. And it's the University of Oxford, not the other one, because there are two universities in Oxford. Did I miss anything?
No, Petru, thank you for the glowing introduction. That was beautiful.
Yeah, the difference between this interview and the other ones is that I know Marius really well. I've seen him at work. I've seen him with 10 terminals open at the same time, writing commands blazingly fast, and I know what he can do. But one important thing about Marius is that he's not like everyone else. He was born with a laptop. He came out with a laptop and he already knew all the terminal commands. He knew how to write code in C++, Perl, and some other languages as well. No, I'm just kidding. He started from scratch, from zero, from square one, like everyone else. And that was a huge inspiration for me, because he was the first person that I knew who was really good at algorithms and data structures, but he also knew how to create real world apps. And now let's start questioning him. So Marius, first of all, please tell me how you started. What's your story? How did you touch a computer for the first time?
So most of this started for me in primary school when I used my computer a lot. I was mostly playing games, of course, but also trying to learn about software. I know I was weirdly passionate about antivirus programs, and I would often go on Yahoo Answers and look for people asking about antivirus software, and I would give them maybe a short comparison of 2 or 3 options they could have. Around 5th grade, I became very interested in writing my own programs. I believe my goal was still to write
When
games.
was that again?
So this was at the beginning of 5th grade when I thought I should learn programming.
How old were you?
Well, that requires computation. We start school at 6 years old here, so add 5.
You started at 6?
When do most people start school?
I started at 7.
Okay, let's say 7 and add 5. So I was around 11, 12 years old then. That's when I decided I should learn programming. And since there is no programming course in middle school here, my parents spoke to a high school programming teacher, Mrs. Arishanu, and we started doing lessons with her.
Sorry, before going into that, why were you so passionate about antivirus programs? I imagine they're not that interesting to a young child.
I like that there were many of them boasting about different features and doing something that seemed hard to me. How do you figure out if a program is bad or good? So I wanted to learn more about them, and I was mostly reading on Wikipedia and on their own product pages.
Did you have any bad experience regarding viruses?
I do not remember a particularly bad experience. No, I don't think so, Petru.
Okay, so you just started giving your advice to people,
Yes.
Getting involved in the Yahoo Answers community.
My very unqualified advice, to be exact.
Did anyone follow your advice and then complain about, oh, my computer just got infected? Why did you recommend this free malware removal tool, which also gives you a free iPhone?
Fortunately, no. Yahoo Answers has very rarely follow-ups. Someone asks a question, someone answers. At best, it's marked as accepted, and then you never hear about the asker again.
Okay, cool. So how did you decide you want to learn programming?
I was playing many games, and I think I wanted to make some of my own. At the same time, I was going to competitions in primary school for mathematics, and I liked them. And I heard that in middle school, there began to be some computer science, some programming competitions, namely the National Olympiad. And I said, hey, I want to go there.
Just like that?
Just like that.
Okay, so then your parents spoke to the high school teacher.
Yes.
And you started training with her?
Yes, I started going to lessons, private lessons with Mrs. Arishano, and that's where I first learned Pascal, my very first programming language.
Oh, I thought you started with C++.
Oh no, Pascal was an exciting experience. Going there and seeing a computer which was all blue with white letters on it, with Borland Pascal running and the program already written, with me not understanding what was going on.
Wow, is that possible? You're not understanding what the code does?
Yes, Petru. As you said, I started from scratch. I knew no programming at that point, and I had to learn Pascal from nothing.
How did you start? Did the teacher teach you, or did you learn from the internet, or what was the ratio between them?
For Pascal, it was almost entirely the teacher teaching me, and at best me looking up some non-essential fun stuff on the internet. I know I really liked the graphics package in Pascal. I would make some nice looking graphics demos. Well, very simple ones, but still.
And were you scared about the blue screen with white letters, or about the compilation errors? How did it feel, like the first experience, the first interaction with the code?
It wasn't really scary, it was more exciting. I was going into a space where I know nothing, and I was looking at it saying, hey, there's so much to learn here. This is really interesting. I want to know everything. That's how I felt at first.
And do you think having a background in math competition helped you? Because I still remember when I did those, some of the problems were so difficult and scary, and I didn't know how to tackle them. But at some point, I got used to not knowing how to do things. And probably because of that, compared to my other colleagues, I wasn't scared about writing code and not writing unfunctional code, non-compiling code.
Oh yes, that definitely helped, especially because I started with programming. I started by learning programming for competitions and not learning programming for personal projects. So having a bit of experience with mathematics helped in sticking to programming at first.
Okay. And what followed next? I suppose you still weren't as good as you are today.
No, the first 2 years were all me doing Pascal and being not so great at it, and going to competitions, going to Olympiads, doing problems, you know the deal. Until 7th grade, that's 2 years later, when I was advised by my teacher to learn C++. So I got 2 books of C++. Started
Like physical books?
Yes, physical books. Don't remember the exact ones, but it was a 3-volume series. Got the first 2, started reading.
Just for the sake of the beginners watching this video, do you still recommend programming books, or do you think they're outdated?
I think programming books are great, but not physical books. I like ebooks now. I still think they're great, at least the ones that are structured as references. Nowadays, when I learn a new programming language, I like to get a reference, maybe the online documentation, but I still think books are better. And after learning the very basics, I try to do a small project while constantly looking concepts in the book.
So you're using the book more like a dictionary and not like a actual book that you learn, that you read page by page.
Yes. I always try to use it as a reference, as a dictionary. And I think that's a good use for books, because in a book, as opposed to just the online documentation, things can be written in a more structured, orderly manner.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you started learning C++ on your own, or was it still, were you still taking classes, or you became independent?
Here it was a much more independent affair where I was mostly learning from the book or from the C++.com reference, but I would also get quite a bit of help from my teacher. And that helped me with learning C++ for competitions. But around the same time, I became interested in learning Java. And for that, I went to the official tutorial, which is actually a very good tutorial. I still recommend it to people to this day. And that was the first, let's say, real-world programming experience I had.
Yeah, it's incredible how good the Java documentation is compared to the other languages documentation, because obviously if you already know how to write code, but compared to other language documentation, which feel more like, okay, here's all the stuff this programming language does, I feel that the Java documentation is more structured, and it kind of takes you through all the important things that you need to know before being able to write some real code. But yeah, obviously that's also because Java, you really have to understand some concepts before you can understand Java.
And they start with those exact concepts in the first few chapters, which I liked.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of a bit cyclical. In order to understand Java, you need to understand classes, but in order to understand classes, you need to understand references, but everything is in Java is passed by value, and it's a bit confusing if you don't know how to how to work with those.
Yeah.
So I suppose you knew already about those from Pascal, right?
I never did any sort of object-oriented things in Pascal. I don't remember doing much of that in C++ in the very beginning, so I had to learn all the classes and objects by the Java tutorial first two chapters.
Mm-hmm. And how did you pick Java? Why did you pick Java and not C# or whatever popular programming language was back there, like PHP, for example?
Oh, that's a good question. So what I was interested in was networking. We go back to games once again. I was playing an online strategy game. That was written in Flash. And
how's the game called?
It was called Battle Dawn. I think it still exists. Yes, it still exists.
So is that your secret?
Yes, play many games. You will have a good life. That's my secret. I played Battle Dawn and I said, hey, I want to make a game like this. And from what I was reading online, to make a multiplayer game, you need a server. I had no good concept of what a server is, but I found a product I found a website that said, hey, we make servers for your games. Buy this server and you can make multiplayer games with it. And if I remember correctly, that was developed in Java. And I said, okay, then maybe I should learn Java to make my own.
Wow, okay. I remember having a similar experience to a different video game. There was a software for creating a server. It was called Trackmania, and it had some part of SQL. And I took a book from my mom, an SQL book, and started reading it, obviously not understanding anything. I knew how to create a database because you only needed to type create database, the name, and create. And then there was this thing called a table, which was very confusing, and I stopped. I remember reading 20 pages of it, not understanding 19 out of them, and then stopped. How many hours were you spending per day in front of the computer? And from that, how many hours were you spending just for programming, like productive things?
I would say I was spending most of my day in front of the computer. Now, that wasn't all programming, as you'd guess. It was also video games. But I would have a pretty busy day. I was in the second half of middle school, training for both mathematics and programming competitions. So I would spend probably 4 or 5 hours a day on both of these things combined.
So games plus?
No, on mathematics problems plus programming for competitions combined. When I started with projects, that wasn't a very, let's say, regular activity. I would fit it in when I felt more like it and when I had some more free time.
Mm-hmm. And weren't your parents mad because you're spending so much time doing math, computer science, playing video games, just spending a lot of time indoors? Because my parents were sometimes saying, oh, you need to go out, you need to see the sun, things like that.
Oh, no, very much no. In fact, they were pushing me and encouraging me to do mathematics and computer science and encouraging me to go to competitions and do my best. And that really helped because I was in an environment where I'm encouraged to work on these things, and then I go to competitions and do well and get reinforcement from that. Mm-hmm. So it was a good environment to be in.
So you're saying that your parents reinforced your habit of training, of preparing, of getting good results, and probably I can forecast where you went from that. So you started getting better results, you trained more, and at what point did you stop doing math and focus completely on coding?
So at the end of the 8th grade, I figured that I can't really do both math and programming at a high enough level.
What does high enough level mean for you?
High enough level was enough to get into the Romanian national team. So I had to drop one of them and focus on the others. So in high school, in 9th grade, I still went to Maths Olympiad, but without doing much training for it. And I was mostly training computer science.
So like playing a game with friends?
Yes, something like that. And then from 10th grade on, I dropped mathematics competitions completely.
And have you been in the national team in the, how do you say, gymnasium or the middle school?
So in middle school, only in 8th grade, I was the first person not to qualify for the Junior Balkan Olympiad in mathematics.
Wow,
team.
Congrats.
Thank you very much. That was an annoying experience, but never in computer science.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel that all the math that you did has helped you learn faster, or was it just a motivation not to feel intimidated by the difficult code, the blue and white screen?
No, I'm pretty confident it helped because it's this mathematical way of thinking about problems and these problem-solving skills you get by doing math problems, which are exactly the same skills and line of thinking you need for computer science. So it helped me in my further programming competitions.
This is a very difficult thing because difficult thing to explain, because a lot of viewers are asking, wow, why do I need all those math problems? And you can't really show them, look, here's a math problem, you solve it on the computer. It's more hidden. You don't see the benefits right away. But statistically, looking at people who become good at CS, most of them have a track record of doing some sort of math.
It's hidden in this term of an ad hoc problem. An ad hoc problem is a problem that's not based on one algorithm, on one data structure, but it's based on an idea someone had. And these problems are the ones where the only way to solve them is to have that mathematical thinking at a good enough level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also in the logical puzzles you sometimes get at the interviews, right?
Oh, that too. I was thinking purely competitions right now.
And what about software development? Like, does math help? Has math helped you in connection to that?
I believe mathematics still helps for software development, but maybe at a lesser level. Mathematics still develops a more organized thinking. And in software development, you often have design questions. I have this problem. How do I go about implementing a solution? And being organized in your thoughts helps a lot there.
And in your code.
And in your code very much, yes. So I would still say mathematics is useful there.
Right. So probably I'm just sum up your experience during high school in connections to coding competitions. So you went to this private high school where you got the scholarship, you trained with the best in the country for coding competitions, and in the 10th grade you first got into the CS national team, you represented Romania at some competitions. But what did you do apart from that? Because when I met you in the 10th grade, you are also very good, not only at coding competitions, but at developing real applications. I still remember your phone bot app, which allowed you to control your phone remotely by using your laptop. How did that start? When you left us at the point where you were learning Java for creating a multiplayer game, what happened from there?
Yes, so I've only spoken about competitions really so far, but in parallel to all of this, I was also working on some personal projects. So back in 7th grade again, when I was learning Java, I wanted to make a server for a multiplayer game. So I made a server. Now, it was a server with no client, just a program that you could talk to over the internet, and I think
was it a physical server or just a program that you ran on your computer?
Oh, it was just a program you would run that would accept connections, and what it did was it would let you upload and download files, and also if two people are connected to the server, they can send messages to each other.
Was this on Linux?
This was, I believe, on Linux, but since this is Java, it doesn't really matter.
And when did you switch to Linux? How did that happen?
I don't exactly remember when I did it, but I heard it would make programming easier. So I switched first to Ubuntu and later to Debian, and I'm still using Debian to this day. It does make programming much easier, and it also
and all the other things harder. I'm kidding. Like
so
video
much.
editing and photo editing, they're definitely more difficult.
Oh, yes.
Or I'm not that experienced for that.
It makes things I'm not doing harder, so I'm happy with that. So I wrote this server, and it wasn't useful at all. There was nothing talking to that server. But around 8th grade, I heard about this other competition called Info-Educație, which was a software development competition. And I said, hey, let's participate here. Let's write a program for that. And so I wrote this chat application in Java, just so there's a use for my server. It only really used the part where you send messages to each other. And participated in Info-Educație with it, which was a fun experience. From then on, I learned a bit more about Linux, because I think beginning of high school is when I switched to Linux, if I'm not mistaken, and learning more about the sort of Unix way and Unix programs.
Where did you learn that from?
That's something I learned mostly by doing things on my computer, on my Linux computer, and making me use the terminal for a lot of things. And whenever I had problems, I would look them up online. And this trial and error system helped me learn all of these things.
Were you involved on any forums or IRC channels or anything like that?
Not so much, actually. I would read forums and be present in IRC channels, but very rarely talk. I was just a lurker.
Okay, so you switched completely to Linux in the 9th grade, and
let's say somewhere around there.
And then I suppose there were the other software development competitions, and you wanted to participate in those. Am I right? Or
Yes. Around the time, I was partially switching. Well, no, not really. Around the time, I was interested in Android applications. So since I already knew Java, that wasn't a big jump, just learn a new standard library for the language I already know. And so that's when I wrote a few programs, one of which is PhoneBot that you saw. with which I participated to InfoEducație once again, and also some international competition in Georgia.
And what were the results?
InfoEducație went great. In the national phase, Phonebot got second place, which means I qualified alongside the other 4 people in the top 5 to the final decisive phase, which was a 24-hour hackathon to implement a program according to some requirements, which in our case was a choice of re-implement Shazam, kind of, or re-implement Shazam but for pictures.
Wow, that's tough for some high school students.
Yes, it was a very different thing to what I was used to, because this was the sort of problem where you can't do it perfectly. It's about doing the best you can. I chose the Shazam option, where you'd get somewhere around 20 songs as learning data, and you had to write a program that, given a 5 to 10 second sample of one of the songs with maybe some distortion applied, would tell you which of the 20 songs it comes from. It was fun to stay up for 24 hours reading Google and finding out how I can do this. And in the end, I won the InfoEducație in that year.
Wow, congrats.
Thank you, Petru.
What algorithm did you use for that, for the matching part?
So what I did was, knowing that the samples were, I think, exactly 10 seconds long all the time, I split every one of my 20 songs into 10-second slices. And then for every 10-second slice, I computed the average volume, I think the average pitch, and maybe the average beats per minute over those 10 seconds. Okay, beats per minute was really, really inexact, so I think I dropped that in the end. And when given a question sample, I would compute the same 3 values for it, and then pick the learning sample which is closest to this and say, oh, it's part of that song. And it worked better than 50%, I think, which was great.
Yeah, and one thing I admired you for is your speed in which you're coding and you're doing things so obviously in the right way. So how do you work on that? How did you work on that? This is also an important thing while you interviewed for Jane Street, because you had to write the code in the right way, but also make it fast, because you only have 50 minutes per interview or so?
50-60 minutes.
Yeah, how did you train on that? How did you become so fast?
Being fast seems to be all about practice. By just spending your day in front of a computer programming for enough days, you get faster and faster and faster. And that's how I did it. That was my life in high school.
Did you also look at other people's code? Because I have students who practice a lot, and sometimes they're still slow, and sometimes my intuition tells me, well, this person is not looking at how other people are coding, or this person is not solving the right problems. He tries to solve problems which are too difficult for its level. How did you tackle that, apart from spending a lot of time?
Oh yes, especially in the context of competitive programming, I would look at other people's solutions, especially when I failed to do a problem, to see how they did it. Or if I did it, but there was a solution that was markedly faster, I would still look at the code and see, oh, interesting, I didn't think of that. Maybe I should learn something from here. And that helped.
Okay, and in high school, how many hours were you spending per day coding and learning things for programming?
Oh, high school. High school was an interesting time. I wouldn't really go to high school that much, I guess. I mean, it was ICHB after all. So I had a lot of the day to myself, which meant I could spend maybe around 8 hours a day on programming.
Wow.
Part of that on competitive programming, part of that on my own projects. But I just had all of this time and I decided I'd use it well.
So you really took advantage of having a high school which allowed you not to go to classes in order to become better.
Yes, that helped a lot because compared to other high schools, the workload was so much lower, meaning I could focus my time there on programming.
And how did you fight the temptation of just playing video games and not doing anything? Because from my experience, not a lot of people checked on you if you were coding or just playing video games, because there were a lot of people back then who were just playing or played for a lot of time.
Oh, here is where social pressure helps a lot. I would be there in the dorms where everyone else around me was also an Olympiad student, maybe not in programming, but maybe in mathematics or physics. And the atmosphere was that everyone around you was working most of the day. So if you were slacking off, you would feel bad about it. All of these people around me are working and I am not. Maybe I should be working too. And it also helped that at least the personal projects were really fun. So I would do those just because I like to do them.
Do you remember any funny stories from the dormitory apart from you disconnecting the router while I was playing?
Oh, that's a story I remember. The dormitory life was fun. I remember the administrators of the dormitory inviting us for tea and generally being nice to us. And I remember that particular instance when they made chikyofte for us, which was beautiful, and gave us dinner.
Made what?
A chikyofte. It's this Turkish dish that is really tasty.
Yeah, there are also other funny stories, like when I was playing at some point, the internet stopped working for Marius and he reset the router and I was playing online. And I didn't took it as a sign for like, Petru, you have to work more if you want to become good. I still worked a lot, but not comparable with Marius. Yeah. All right. So why did you decide to leave Romania and go to Oxford? How did you choose the university? And maybe if you can talk more freely about the things that you think are important for someone who's right now in middle or high school. What are your advices? What are the things that you think that you did really well during that period?
All throughout high school, going to university abroad was the goal. And that was the goal not just for me, but for many people in the class I was. So see, once again, social pressure. We didn't go to competitions just to get good results in competitions. We saw the competitions as a way to get us to the goal of going to the best university possible, which happens to be not in Romania. Towards the end of high school, I began to research universities and start applying to universities both in the US and in the UK. In the UK, the rule is you may not apply to both Cambridge and Oxford at the same time. And I found out in my research that the BAC requirement for Oxford,
which is the graduation exam,
was much lower than that for Cambridge. So it seems to me now that Oxford select people more strictly by the interview and less strictly by the high school ending exam results, whereas Cambridge do the opposite. And because I was worried about what my grade will be in the Romanian language and literature exam, I chose to go to Oxford, and I'm very happy I made that choice now that I have friends at Cambridge.
Why are you saying that?
I have friends at Cambridge with whom I talk sometimes, and they seem to be, I think, buried in work is the term I want to use. They seem to have no free time, and that's bad. I wouldn't want to live a life like that.
And do you think, yeah, obviously you had a lot of free time in high school, which was not actually free, but you did what you chose to. Do you think that the kind of work they're doing at Cambridge is useful in terms of maybe it's a lot of work, but they become better at programming, or you think it's not that relevant? I'm asking this coming from a university in Romania where you still have some work, and that work is not necessarily very useful a lot of times, not most of the times, but a lot of times.
So I think what they are doing there is interesting. I've looked at lists of courses, and there are quite a few things they do that we do not. And some of those things I would like to do myself, such as distributed computing, is something I really wanted to learn and was never offered at Oxford. But what I don't like is that you are forced to work that much. It would be nice to have the option of doing a lot of things you might be interested in, but if you are forced to do everything, then you will have a bad time.
Mm-hmm. Did you apply to other universities in other countries, and why did you choose the UK?
So I also applied to a few more universities in the UK, and Oxford was the best one that I got into. And I applied to some universities in the US, but no university in the US accepted me with a full scholarship. And as you know, the prices in the US are crazy. You do not want to pay that much.
Especially if you already know how to code.
Oh, yes. So I went to Oxford, and I'm very happy I made this choice, because not only am I closer to home, but I also benefit from maybe the longest vacations of any university anywhere.
Yeah, but it's a bit weird talking about Oxford and talking about the vacations, not other benefits, because like if you really want a vacation, you can just take a private university, a long distance university, and you have all year round vacation.
Well, yes, but one thing a friend told me around high school is that all of these top universities, the teachers there are probably better than you, and the level of instruction is probably enough for you, whichever university to go to. So I think that you will probably be equally happy academically with Oxford, Cambridge, Stanford, all of these very best universities. So why not make the choice in terms of quality of life rather than absolute academic?
Mm-hmm. What's the fee for Oxford? How much would a regular person who goes there for computer science pay per year?
So Oxford nowadays charge 90 to 150 pounds a year, which is the tuition fee. And you get a loan from the government for this money that you then pay over the next 30 years as a percentage of your income. So you can see this as a sort of extra tax that you pay on your salary. And then you still need to pay room and board. The accommodation I have, it costs me around 4,000, let's say 3,500, 4,000 pounds a year, which is only really 6 months, the 6 months I am there. Mm-hmm. And then you need to buy food, clothes, planes back home.
Yeah, which you can document online.
Exactly.
So let's go back to high school. What would you advise people who are in high school, who want to become really good at coding, maybe get a good job or be really fast when creating projects? What's your advice on that? How can you become that good?
I believe the best advice I can give to people who want to become good is to put in the hours, do the work. That's perhaps the best chance at getting good. It worked for me. It might work for you.
The secret of becoming world-class programmer shared right now on our YouTube channel. All right, so also in terms of getting good for interviews, do you recommend the same thing, just put in the work? Or so you're not emphasizing like work smart, you think just do the work and the other things will follow?
So I think for becoming good in programming, it's just doing the work. It's just building many personal projects. And I don't think you have to be very smart about what projects you are building, because whatever you are building that is interesting to you will make you better at programming. For interviews, I think a different approach might be better. Interviews tend to be pretty standardized, pretty formulaic, I could say. And there are books, widely recommended books, such as Cracking the Coding Interview, which tell you all about how an interview is structured and what sort of things you need to focus on so you can work smart, as you said. And that's also what I would advise people to do if they have hard interviews coming up.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize something you said earlier about working on something which is interesting to you, because I feel that a lot of times, at least for me, I feel tempted not to do something interesting for me just because it's technically difficult to implement a vision. And this is one thing I learned while working on WellCode, that some features are just awesome for the users to have, and even if those are difficult and maybe unpleasant to implement, if I push myself, the users will be happy, I'll become better technically, and it's just awesome. And speaking about technologies, personal projects, what do you think are the hot technologies? That this is a very popular topic on YouTube. A lot of people are talking, well, just tell me what's the best programming language? What should I learn?
Yes, I hear this very much all the time, and I think it is the wrong question to ask, because if you become a good programmer, no matter the technologies you learned programming with, you will be able to easily pick up most technologies. So you should more focus on a set of technologies and programming language that make it easiest to build those projects that are interesting to you. Nowadays, I hear many people using Python. It seems to be one of the most popular languages nowadays, and it makes many things easy, which I like. I myself still do most of my projects in Perl, which is a similar language to Python. Some people might be better served by learning functional programming. Haskell is a popular choice. OCaml is a more reasonable choice.
So if you'd be back in the 7th grade with no coding experience, but before going back, you'd have to pick some languages and technologies for yourself to learn. Which ones would you pick?
Today, I think I would really want to learn functional programming, maybe even as one of the first things to do. Because when I did so, I found it changed my way of thinking in a good way. I would probably also want to learn Lisp, a language which I sadly still do not know, even though I've said I want to learn it for a long time. I find the idea of very powerful macros to be very interesting to me, and that also changes your way of thinking for the better.
And would you do real-world projects in Lisp?
Yes, I would do real-world projects in Common Lisp, I believe. It seems like it's a good language. It does not have all the libraries, sadly, so there'll be more things I need to do by myself. But it would probably be a fun activity to write my own libraries for doing things.
Speaking of fun activity, were you passionate from the beginning about programming, or how much was it passion, how much was it work and needing to go to a good university? How do you view things right now?
So here I would once again separate the competitive programming versus the personal projects. In competitive programming, it started out as passion for mathematics and as passion for getting good results, self-reinforcement from before. But at least midway in high school, it gradually became less of a passion and more of work. I know towards the end I was really thinking, I don't really want to do this problem, but I need this to get into a good university, so I will do this problem. In contrast, personal projects, I always had the flexibility of doing as much of them or as little of them as I want. I wasn't pushing myself to do more than I wanted for some loftier goal, such as getting into Oxford. So those projects were always driven by passion and by my desire to do things that are interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and luckily you had the social pressure not to.
Not to stop working, yes. That helped. That's maybe the most useful aspect of my high school life. Seeing everyone around me work meant I didn't even consider stopping work. And that helped me get to where I am now.
Mm-hmm. So social pressure and work.
Yes.
And a different question. Let's say you had an accident and you forget programming.
Wow.
But you still have 10 minutes to write for yourself what things to learn again, because your brain still works in order to get a job as a programmer. What would you advise yourself? Because compared to being in middle school, you don't have that much time to learn it. You need to get hired and start earning money in order to survive. What would you pick?
Oh, that's a hard question, because I guess it depends in what sort of company I would want to get hired. Perhaps nowadays, if the goal is just to get hired, not necessarily to get hired in a pleasant job, but get hired somewhere, I would definitely go with the web technologies. I would learn JavaScript, I would learn HTML, I would learn CSS, and that's probably all I would need to learn to just get a job.
Without any specific frameworks?
Frameworks, I think I would be happy. Okay, sure, I forgot all of programming, so I can't even learn things on the job now, right?
Yeah.
I would need to learn some frameworks. That I don't do web anymore. I have no idea what are the popular frameworks.
Okay.
I keep hearing about Vue.js. Maybe that's good. I have no idea.
Yeah, this is the last time we did an interview 1 year ago about that, and at that time React, I think, was the most popular, React and Angular, and now it's Vue. And probably 1 year from now, hopefully you'll join us again. Probably we'll talk about some other JS framework.
Oh yes, the fun part about web technologies is that the frameworks keep changing, so you don't need to invest too much emotion into one framework. It'll go away, like everything.
Like some characters in Game of Thrones.
Like some characters in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and you were speaking about your job not having to be pleasant. What's your take on the happiness at the job?
My take on that is that different jobs are, well, different, and some are more enjoyable, some are less enjoyable. I am personally not a fan of web programming and of mobile development, which seems to be a pretty big part of the job market nowadays.
This is strange, knowing that you did some mobile apps.
Yes, I went through all of that, and now I find it less enjoyable, which is weird, I guess. Maybe I'm a bit biased now, I'm not sure. It's also a question of what you get your motivation from, because there are people who only care about doing interesting problems, think mathematics problems or logical challenges, and compare them to the people who just like to know they made somebody's life better. People who are motivated by, oh, I wrote this program, maybe it's not the most interesting program, but it made somebody's life better. So depending on where you are on that scale, you might be happier with really any job that makes you feel useful, or it might make you much more selective.
What makes you happy? What motivates you? Where are you in this category?
In this category, I am more towards the doing something interesting camp than the making somebody happy camp.
Really?
Yes. But fortunately, I find a lot of things interesting. I personally like networking quite a bit and learning about all the technologies in that space.
Okay, thank you. This is strange because you helped us a lot with WellCode, and we're on the complete opposite side. So I remember lots of time just doing some sort of container which allows us to store some obvious thing which is not technically challenging, just in order to make the experience better for the users. And me bugging you with questions about those feels weird you saying not you are not working for something just helping people, but just being interested, because you are still helping a lot. So this is a contradiction.
Well, you see, the sort of questions you are asking, many of them were design questions, were this is the problem I have, how should I go about implementing it? And that's something I find very interesting, to consider different solutions to a problem and find one. And even if the problem is not technically challenging, the aspect of looking for different solutions and finding the best one is something I enjoy. I helped you with all of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. And before ending this interview, I still have some questions. So I remember talking to you about Bitcoin and all the buzz when it was exploding, and we were talking, you were saying about the technology not being that innovative. What do you think there are some innovative technologies right now, or what do you think are some things that are going to explode in the next year or in the next 5 years?
Oh, that's another hard question. I tend to not follow the new technologies so much. So far, I managed to not jump onto the artificial intelligence and machine learning bandwagon, although I still enjoy some things that come up from that space. For example, recently OpenAI published their GPT-2 text recognition and text generation model, which I found to be amazing and to generate really interesting essays on various topics. So that I find exciting. I think at least machine learning is already so hyped up now that
it can go really higher.
It can't go much higher. Yes. And once again, I stayed out from that space. Oh yes, Internet of Things, another buzzword, another thing I keep hearing about, and another thing that, like Bitcoin, I find to be a really bad idea, mostly from a security standpoint. Put a microchip in everything, connect it to the internet, don't ever update it, and you will be a sad person. We're still doing things in that area, right? Especially in home automation. Let's put chips in more of our everyday household appliances.
And in your lock,
yes.
the door lock, that I find crazy. Even though I enjoy having smart light bulbs and change the color of them, I still feel that some things like doors need to be like
more mechanical.
Yeah.
Yes, I know exactly what you are saying, and this is an area where that I'm very wary of, and I would say, I want to stay far from this. I do not want to get involved in it because it has the potential to go really badly in a security sense.
Mm-hmm. What about quantum computing or maybe cryptocurrencies?
Oh, quantum computing is really exciting. I did a course on that just last year and found it very enjoyable and very crazy in a good way. It's something I don't understand fully. I'm far from understanding fully, and it also seems to be not that close to being something practical. But you hear about more results from that space, and it seems good. I would be happy if it became something more successful, if the researchers managed to build stronger, larger quantum computers, because they enable solving a pretty wide class of problems much faster.
Mm-hmm. And you avoided the last subject being cryptocurrencies, blockchain. I remember this summer being in the Bay Area, everyone was talking about blockchain and trying to apply it everywhere.
Well, yes, most of the blockchain hype died down, fortunately, by now. As before, I'm still against this space. It still seems to be a space mostly oriented towards how can we scam people out of as much money as possible, rather than how can we build the most useful product.
Mm-hmm. But there's still one cryptocurrency which is real, the WellCoin.
Oh yes, I believe WellCoins are amazing. It's the first cryptocurrency I see that is based on plastic as opposed to blockchain, and I think that's a very innovative idea. Thanks, Petru, for working to develop this project. I hope it will be successful.
Yeah, thanks a lot for being here with me on the interview. I hope we'll do this again soon. And until then, I wish you all the best. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you like this video. If you have questions for Marius, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'll send them by email to Marius because he doesn't use social network. Oh, by the way, before ending this, this is the last and important question. Why aren't you on social media? You're not on Facebook, you're not on Instagram. Why are you not on those?
Are you not reading the news, Petru? Are you not seeing how nowadays every week we get more scandals about privacy problems with be it Facebook, be it...
And you also don't have a Google account, right?
Yes, I don't have a Google account. That is correct. And I want things to stay that way for the near future. I'm looking at these companies that offer free products with a lot of privacy implications I don't like. So I try to be quite conservative in this space. If I don't gain very much from taking a privacy risk, I will try to not take it. And that's how I stayed away from social media.
Yeah, obviously, because you're not having a startup to run, you're not promoting lots of things, then you don't get a lot of benefits, especially being as technically good as you are. People will find ways to reach you if they really need you. But can you be more specific about the privacy risk, because you're more experienced in this field? What do you fear? What do you fear about the most in terms of privacy risks?
Yes, so the one thing that's closest to social media that I use is Reddit. And I was actually thinking about the following a few days ago. And I was thinking about this a few days ago. Reddit keeps all of your posts and comments, even from 10 years ago. So whatever you write on the internet, when you have some opinion and tell some people about it, it will still be there 10 years later unless you go through the work of deleting it. And what's most worrying to me is me having an opinion, having that immortalized on the internet, and then later coming to regret that opinion.
Like we are doing right now about those.
Exactly, yes. This is what I want to avoid, so thanks, Petru, for inviting me to this interview.
So you're thinking about getting involved into politics at some point, and you think this interview will surface up and people will start, okay, Marius is the one who doesn't use social media, who hasn't used before going to politics, or...
I hope to not get involved into politics anytime soon. In fact, being at university, student politics turned me off quite a bit on politics in general. It's not a very pleasant space to be in, but many students are very enthusiastic about that.
One big concern for me, at least, is the way social media targets ads. So at some point I end up browsing through electronics and thinking about, whoa, I really need I really need this kind of product. And this is my biggest fear, because I know that things get in my subconscious mind and I'm not actually able to control it because it's my subconscious mind, and at some point I'll be predisposed to buy something which I don't like.